Hi, everyone. It's brilliant that you're all here and that I can't see very many of you. But one thing, despite not being able to really gauge, I'm wondering whether you've ever been asked to think out of the box. Yeah? So, in fact, it seems like alongside time management, teamwork, and all these softer transferable skills that you're supposed to bring into your workplace, in order to be competitive in the job market these days, you're also required to be creative, imaginative, to think out of the box, such that ideas start to become commodified. Take a moment to think about what it means to think out of the box. Do we know where the box is? Are you in one? Is somebody going to try to put you in one? Are you able to actually manipulate your box somewhat? Or is the point actually to come back to a box and inspect what's inside? So for now, I'm going to stay within my red circle and think inside it, hopefully along with you, inspired by some of the most interesting photography that I've seen in the past 2 years or so. And from there, try to get a sense to come back to ourselves in order to define the power of imagination. According to philosophers, imagination is no more than really just calling images back into the mind for them to be present. So in fact, things that you have picked up from the past, things that you have seen, the ways that you put ideas back into your brain as you confront the world. So whether you're dealing with global challenges, solving world hunger, or whether you're given a brief in order to come up with something that is going to speak to a diverse audience, you are already employing your imagination. This idea of creativity as production, something that needs to be externalized into a product, into something that you could share with others, well, let's take a step back, step inside the box, and see what's there already in your mind. According to the philosophers, there is deliberate and spontaneous imagination. So think of an experiment. If you are a scientist, you need a hypothesis, independent variables, some constants, etc., right? From then on, you actually devise the scientific method, and you follow it. Or you could be Archimedes. You make some splashes in your bathtub, and eureka, you've got something new. Imagination could also be occurrent and non-occurrent, depending on whether you are paying explicit attention to something when you are imagining. So, for instance, you've just won the lottery. The first thing that pops into your mind might be, relaxing on the beach somewhere, right? And in fact, what you imagine at that point is occurrent to you because you're paying attention to it. What is not occurrent is, well, how do you actually collect the money? Which bank account really? How much are you going to give away? How much are you going to keep? The processes of it. Alongside that, we're also pushed to think about imagination creatively. Creative imagination as in putting ideas together in an unpredictable and rather spontaneous, fun sort of way. Nothing more than, say, a unicorn. You've never seen a horse with a horn. You have seen horns. You have seen horses. You put them together, and now make it pink. Beyond that, there's also sensory imagination. So when you watch a film and you see somebody eating a lemon, right? And when you start to salivate, in fact, what you are doing, without thinking that you're imagining anything, is that, in fact, you are experiencing the same thing as the person that you're seeing on the screen. And yet there is no sensory stimuli, right? So that's another thing that we can do. And recreative imagination, that is, taking experiences that you have never had and having the ability to think through it and experience it. Take, for instance, science fiction, right? that is something that in fact follows through with a particular principle that is otherworldly, and then coming to a logical conclusion at the end. So, in terms of other worlds, I wonder what you see on the screen. Something planetary, perhaps something from outer space, an image with different sorts of worlds in one. But in fact, these are photographs taken by a Norwegian photographer, Christopher Jonassen, for a project called Devour, of worn-out frying pans. So here you see the 6 different images. Interesting. So in fact, whatever you saw before, right, keep in mind your first reaction to it, and then once the images are actually separated, and you get some context as to how they're created, you see that the photographer himself is sharing with you his recreative imagination. The point here is that the photograph series is actually called Devour. The idea is that when you eat, according to Jean-Paul Sartre, French existentialist, that you are actually appropriating by destruction. But as you destruct, you also create and you construct who? Yourself. So every moment of taste, every decision that you make, that you think, well, it doesn't really contribute to my imagination, etc., it's just my subjective experience, think of it as adding to who you are, such that you're authentic and sincere. Here, we have an image of a mirrored lookout, designed by Angus Ritchie and Daniel Tyler, 2 architects in Scotland, photographed by Ross Campbell. Here, the idea is that imagination could be transformative, not transformative, external to you, but rather transforms yourself. According to William Wordsworth, Romantic poet, he says that the imagination is like an auxiliary light that shines out of you and illuminates nature, with a capital N, around you. It is a spiritual connection that you have with the world. So in fact, being imaginative means living your life imaginatively, rather than having to employ imagination in order to produce ideas or solutions. The mind, then, is seen to be a plastic power, a forming hand, such that you are able to refract reality, rather than just reflect it. I'm not entirely sure what you see. Perhaps a variety of things. Something organic, moving, with a certain kind of energy through it. This is a photograph by German photographer Katrine Korfmann, who lives in Amsterdam, from a series called Ensembles Assembled. What you see are people in Catalonia at the annual Castells building competition, starting to build up the highest and tallest human building possible. So this is a picture of cooperation. And in fact, strength comes from collective imagination. On the one hand, we're talking about an inner stillness from the Romantics that radiates out. It needn't be seen as a concrete object that is the product of your imagination, but rather that you transform yourself and therefore the world around you. It is not about anything that you need to unleash, awaken, unlock, right? As though there's something wrong with you if you're not being creative and you're not sufficiently imaginative. We do this every day. You're doing this now by even looking at me speak, by interacting with the images on stage. So come to think of it, whether it's solitary imagination that you could do, sitting in the audience, or alone, or in the shower, in nature, or in a building, at work, or otherwise, or socially, as a collective group, as you are now. Perhaps it would be interesting for us to come back to ourselves and the importance of being able to think, to feel, and to live in an imaginative way, rather than having to go on retreats, or rather to be pushed by a timeline. In fact, imagination, creativity is something that we hold inside ourselves without much effort. Imagining, then, is merely, but no less, than being human. Thank you.